Thank you.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Emma Hardy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As many honourable members will know, Hull is the capital of the caravan manufacturing in the UK, and the Hull MPs have a strong tradition of standing up for the sector. My colleague, the Honourable Member for Hull North, was instrumental in protecting the industry after the global financial crash in 2008, and she was joined by my colleague, the Honourable Member for Hull East, in the fight against the caravan tax during the coalition government. And so I take up the baton with my Hull colleagues today to ask the government to act to protect this vital industry. I first wrote to the government on the challenges facing the caravan industry in a letter dated the 20th of May, jointly with my honourable friends, the colleagues for Hull East and Hull North, and addressed to the Prime Minister. In it, we asked that caravan dealerships should be opened at the same time as car dealerships, and that in line with the then current guidance for estate agents and house viewings, caravan parks should also be allowed to open for sales and lettings. I am happy to say that those asks were met by the government, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank the government for heeding the calls from the industry and acting upon them. Because like businesses across the country, caravan manufacturers have also benefited from the government's economic support measures, including the Job Retention Scheme and the Business Interruption Loan Scheme. But unfortunately, all these measures have not been enough to alleviate sufficiently the pressure on the industry, and without further intervention, the future is stark. The position of the caravan manufacturers set them apart from others in the manufacturing sector, as they are entirely dependent on the trade in the leisure and tourism sector. Yes, of course.
I congratulate the lady for bringing forward this debate. She made a very good point. Would she agree with me that the caravan industry, there's a need to consider it right through its supply chain, from the manufacturing that takes place in Hull and the East Riding, right through to coastal communities like the Waveney constituency that I represent? Because when you sneeze, we get a cold as well.
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and he's quite right. As I mentioned, Hull is the capital of the caravan manufacturing in the UK, but that's not to say that it doesn't have a vital industry in other areas of the country as well. But because the caravan manufacturers are not officially part of the leisure and tourism sector, they are not eligible for the extra government support that leisure and tourism enjoy. So I'm here to speak up for an industry facing unique challenges, and one which plays a pivotal role in the prosperity of a region which has no capacity to withstand its loss. The caravan industry is a great British manufacturing success story. The industry supply chain is comprised of caravan manufacturers and their suppliers, which feed into the UK retail network of caravan parks and caravan dealerships and distributors. The industry contributes £9 billion a year to the UK economy and is a growing exporter. Employment within the supply chain stands at 207,580. And I understand that the Honourable Member for Strangeford has the third largest caravan site in Northern Ireland.
I thank the Honourable Lady for giving way, and very clearly the Honourable Lady has indicated the importance of the caravan manufacturing industry, but it also depends upon the caravans and the people buying, also depends upon the caravan season. In Northern Ireland we have just announced this, that the 26th of January will be a restart. Does she, or would the Honourable Lady love to see that happening in relation to a start for the caravan sector, and also that the tourism sector would then progress from that?
Right, the honourable gentleman has, of course, made his point very well. I must just point out that this is a very narrow debate, and we will stick to the rules. We're talking about the caravan industry in Hull and the East Riding. Emma Hardy.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And of course, I'd be happy to support caravan manufacturing and people everywhere. Thank you. When the lockdown came on the 24th of March, 3,361 caravan parks closed, along with 381 caravan dealerships. Restrictions on travel were introduced and the public were ordered to stay at home. At a stroke, 2.4 million people were denied the use of their caravan, either static or towed. The result was that the entire caravan manufacturing industry came to an abrupt halt. Notwithstanding the requirements for effective social distancing and hygiene in workplaces, as no more orders were arriving on the company's books, 208 caravan manufacturers and 647 suppliers closed. and currently 90% of the workforce is furloughed. The manufacturers have been working hard ensuring their factories can reopen safely for their workers, respecting the relevant distancing and hygiene guidance. However, the caravan industry is a seasonal business, with the prime selling and order period occurring between March and September. This lockdown could not have come at a worse time, right at the start of a crucial period.
Way, and I'm also aware of the Deputy Speaker's insistence that we bring this debate to Hull. One of the great things about Hull is it produces this great British manufacturing that trundles its way down the motorways to places like North Cornwall. Will the Honourable Lady join me in supporting this great British manufacturing industry, but also call for the safe reopening of tourism so that many of the tours can then take place in the southwest?
Honourable Member for his intervention, and of course I think wherever we can prove and make the case for safe reopening, that is something I would urge the government to look at, because the longer that closures have continued the greater the losses have become. And as I speak here in mid-June with possibly the entire season in jeopardy, the prospect of business failures and substantial redundancies in the winter look inevitable without further government intervention. The tourer and motorhome industry has lost its income from seasonal sales, and the lack of orders taken will leave it unable to sustain itself over winter. The unsold stock in the supply chain will depress whatever demand there is. The static caravan manufacturers face the prospect that whenever caravan parks and holiday parks do reopen, there will be little demand for the production of new units over the winter for the yearly refreshing of rental units. Those businesses will be either enable or extremely reluctant to spend money because of the loss of revenue, and will choose instead to make do with last year's models. This is borne out of independent forecasts for 2020. Sales are predicted to be worse than experienced in the global financial crisis of 2008. Compared to 2019, touring caravans face a market decline of 49%. Holiday or static caravans a decline of 56%, and motorhomes a decline of 55%. Thousands of employees are currently furloughed. They will either be made redundant, with current estimates of around 40% of the entire workforce, or lose their jobs through company failure. The economic and social impact will be directly felt in areas already under tremendous economic pressure and with high levels of deprivation.
She's making a very powerful case for a very competitive sector in which her constituents in Hull West and Hessle are competing with some of my constituents in Dells Lane and Consett, who make the eldest caravans. I think what we're saying, what the Honourable Lady is saying, is we're facing a very competitive sector, and actually the government support here isn't a proper dying industry, but it's a proper thriving industry to allow it to survive and succeed into the future.
Honourable Member for his intervention. He is absolutely right. This is a thriving industry, or at least it was until COVID-19, and with the right support it can be a thriving industry once again. The Hull and East Riding caravan industry originally developed in the 1950s, taking advantage of the plentiful imports of timber through the ports of Hull and Goole. Leading companies in the area now include Swift, Willoughby, ABI, Atlas, Delta, Coachman, Europa and Victory. We are proud that these represent the largest of caravan manufacturers in the UK, and in 2019 produced 50% of the national total for touring caravans, 30% of motorhomes, and a staggering 90% of holiday caravans. We are indeed, as I mentioned, the caravan building capital of the United Kingdom. And in addition, the wider industry that has developed around this skill base produces park lodges, modular homes and relocatable buildings. These companies and other smaller manufacturers support many others as part of their supply chain. A typical static caravan, for example, requires 2,500 parts and requires hand-finished by skilled craftspeople. In our area, 20,000 jobs rely directly or indirectly on the manufacture and sale of caravans and motorhomes. And as the Honourable Member mentioned, prior to this crisis, these companies' order books were full, and at least one of the major manufacturers was planning to expand its facilities. In the medium to long term, it is anticipated demand for static caravans and lodges, based on bulk orders emanating from lodge and caravan parks, as well as demand for touring caravan and campervans, will be significant. I understand 2021 bookings for holiday parks is extremely high already. It is entirely plausible that in our altered circumstances they will see an increase in demand beyond that anticipated as people prepare to holiday in the UK on sites where social distancing can be achieved. Static and mobile caravan sites are well placed to meet those requirements. The question will be who will meet that demand. Will another once proud British industry be allowed to go to the wall and see demand replaced by imports, jobs and money flowing out of the country? This is surely not what is meant by the government's aspirations to be a global Britain. And as I said earlier, caravans and motorhome manufacturers have benefited from the government's economic support measures. Most staff are furloughed and they are able to access the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme. However, the industry is entirely dependent on trade in the leisure and tourism sector. And leisure and tourism has been rightly identified by the government at the start of their pandemic response as being uniquely impacted by the requirements of the lockdown, the new rules on social distancing and the initial restrictions on even small gatherings. It introduced extra support for this sector. However, the caravan industry has not been made eligible for this support despite the fact it is totally reliant on the sector. Because of the destruction of the 2020 selling and order season, even as the restrictions on the leisure sector are eased and caravan parks and campsites reopen, the caravan manufacturing industry will see very few new orders. As things stand, it can only hope to struggle on until winter before the crushing economic realities can no longer be avoided. 95% of caravans are privately owned, they're self-contained, and the generous separation distance between units is actually far greater than the spacing of many new detached homes. And as such, they offer perhaps the safest form of leisure and holiday accommodation now that the restrictions on the COVID-19 pandemic has imposed on us and is set to be with us for quite some time. The demand and opportunities for overseas travel are likely to be reduced. Demand for safe, domestic holidays will increase without doubt. A caravan-based holiday could soon register towards the top of the list of holiday accommodation choices. And I speak as someone who's been taking my children, my two daughters, on caravan holidays every year to various haven sites up and down the country since they were both born. So I can personally vouch for the enjoyment of a static caravan holiday. But this demand will not be fully realised until the summer of 2021 at the very least. And whether that demand is met by British manufacturers or their overseas competitors will depend entirely on the actions that the government takes right now. Now, the Labour leader of Hull City Council and the Conservative leader of the East Riding of Yorkshire Council jointly wrote to the Chancellor on the 5th of June asking for clarification on whether the caravan industry is eligible for the business rate relief funded by the government. As the fortunes of the industry are tied directly to the holiday and leisure sector, it would seem to be wholly reasonable for the government to extend them to the same facilities. Their position, the council leader's position, and also that of industry, is that granting such access would allow the local authorities to offer significant support and be invaluable in preventing further job losses while retaining the capacity to immediately respond to any eventual upturn in the market. I would ask the Minister to urge his colleagues at the Treasury to make this relief available. Currently, the furlough scheme is proposed to start to be reduced in August, concluding in October. But this coincides with what is normally the latter part of the industry's sales season. As I've already said, the majority of that season has already been lost. Existing surplus stock is likely to cover any pickup in demand before the winter, when sales and consumer orders are normally low, and there is no reason to believe that this winter would be any different. As already mentioned, at the same time, holiday parks who've been normally looking to replace old units and consider expansions are probably going to make do due to lack of funds and confidence. Therefore, while the rest of the economy might be expecting to show signs of recovery as activity and demand begin to grow, the caravan manufacturers will remain in the doldrums with little or no work available until the new cycle begins in spring 2021. I would therefore ask that consideration is given to a flexible, sector-focused approach to ending the furlough scheme, which would allow its extension in the case of the caravan manufacturing industry so that companies are able to retain staff through an extended period of inactivity. The caravan manufacturing industry is the neck of the supply chain funnel, and it is vital that the government supports it through autumn and winter until spring 2021. This would avoid job losses, safeguard capacity, enable them to respond quickly to improvements in market conditions when they arrive. Can I ask that the Minister impress on his colleagues at the Treasury the exceptional circumstances of this industry, circumstances that set them at odds with what may be happening with the economy as a whole? However, the people of Hull and East Riding, and no doubt the rest of the country, want to work. They don't want to sit at home. And far better than furlough would be orders. As a way of stimulating demand, I would urge the government to consider mechanisms such as allowing static caravan site owners to be able to accelerate capital write-offs or other value-added tax measures. The French government has moved to protect its own caravan manufacturing industry in a special loan scheme for its tourism and leisure sector, which specifically allows the purchase of holiday caravans with no capital payback for the first 2 years. I bring it to the Minister's attention not only because it is worthy of consideration, but to underline the fact that the government cannot assume that foreign competition will be as badly affected as the UK industry currently stands to be. I should also note that France already has a flexible furlough scheme in place for tourism and leisure industry. The National Caravan Council and its members have lobbied hard for the supply chain to be unlocked, and it is now vital that the reopening of caravan parks begins as soon as it is safe to do so. I would urge the government to give clarity to the sector so it can start to make these critical preparations. Following the 2008 financial crash, 3 out of every 10 caravan manufacturers in Hull closed their doors. The workforce in the manufacturing sector and industry reduced by 55%. This was a body blow to the city and the surrounding area. Thousands of families were affected and the effects can still be felt. Hull remains one of the most deprived local authority areas in the country on every metric. The last 2 years have seen an unemployment rate actually rise in Hull. It now faces a round of closures and redundancies that are set to eclipse even the disaster of 2008. If the government's stated intention is truly to level up the country, then Hull and those areas that accompany it at the top of these lists must be the places they begin this process. Those within the industry assure me that without further intervention from the government, the impact of COVID-19 is likely to hit the industry twice as hard as it did in 2008. I cannot bring myself to contemplate the devastation that that would bring. It simply cannot be allowed to happen. I would like to remind the Minister that before the pandemic enveloped us, this was a healthy and growing industry. And it can be again, so long as it is given the support that it needs now. And I urge him to consider its unique circumstances and its vital contribution to some of the most deprived areas in the UK. So I once again ask him to consider the specific calls for the support I have made here today. The inclusion of the caravan sector in the business rates relief available to the leisure and tourism sector. A flexible sector-specific extension to the furlough scheme. And a package of measures designed to stimulate the leisure and tourism sector to purchase new and replacement stock as it would under normal circumstances. The Minister must engage with the industry and the National Caravan Council and take their case to the Treasury to avoid the destruction of thousands of jobs and the families and communities those jobs support. The government were elected with a promise to level up. It is now time to prove that it is more than just a slogan, by supporting the Hull MP's call to protect the caravan industry. The government cannot once again be too slow to act. Because along with the 207,580 people employed in the caravan supply sector, I look forward to the Minister's response.
Carl Turner.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I begin by congratulating my honourable friend for securing this incredibly important debate, and there are things that I want to reiterate that my honourable friend has already said. We are, Madam Deputy Speaker, incredibly proud of the caravan manufacturing industry in our neck of the woods. Those jobs are incredibly good jobs. They pay very well. We saw in 2008-9, despite the previous Labour government's interventions to mitigate the damage from that economic crash, we saw tens of thousands of job losses in our region. And the reality is this, Madam Deputy Speaker, most of those jobs have not been replaced. We've had investment from Siemens, a massive 350 million investment into offshore wind turbine manufacturing, which we are incredibly grateful for as well. But actually, the reality is this: once those jobs are lost, it's very often the case that we never see those jobs replaced. And the frank truth is this: we just simply cannot afford to lose these incredibly good, well-paid, skilled manufacturing jobs in our region. As my honourable friend has already said, 90% of all static caravans are manufactured in Hull and the East Riding. 50% of all tourer caravans are manufactured in our area, and 30% of all motor homes as well. And I suppose this is it, really. We've got not much of an ask, in my view, Minister, because we need support, and it's true, and we're very grateful to the government for the support and their interventions that they've made already. But we need that flexibility in the job retention scheme to be extended for this very unique and specific industry. And indeed, we need the government to think carefully about the business rate relief grants as well. We will get over this with support from the government. We only need to get into next year, and then the industry will absolutely be booming once again. My wife mentioned to me earlier today when I spoke to her that she doesn't intend to be going abroad on holiday for quite some time. And it is true. Staycations are going to be the thing in the next year or two. So, Minister, I finish with a plea.
Order. The Honourable Gentleman can't say so, Minister. The Honourable Gentleman has to say, through the chair, will the Minister. I'm sorry to stop him in his tracks just as he was about to make his plea, but if I don't get this right from members with experience in this chamber, then we will lose the rules whereby we keep order here, and it's very, very important that that should be done, especially for new members to understand how things are done properly. So I'd be grateful if the Honourable Gentleman would just address the chair.
Madam Deputy Speaker, you're absolutely right, of course, and I take your advice on board and apologise indeed. Madam Deputy Speaker, I finish, as I was saying, on a plea to the Minister. If the government supports us now, that will be repaid tenfold in the manufacturing industry. Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate the honourable member for Hull West and Hessle for securing this evening's debate, and for the passionate speech by the member for Hull East. A number of colleagues were ingenious in their interventions. Certainly the member for North West Durham, because of Eldis in his constituency, and of course the member for Strangford, Waveney and North Cornwall. But there is one member present who cannot speak, as he is the whip in charge, which is the member for Mid Dorset and North Poole, who has Regal in his constituency. I am certainly aware, as Stratford upon Avon, as you can imagine, has some wonderful caravan parks and caravan holidays, and I urge anyone looking for that staycation, as the member for Hull East quite rightly reminded us, to visit, or at least have on their schedule Stratford upon Avon. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the Honourable Lady for the work that she does, but also those in public, private and community and voluntary sectors and partners across Hull and the East Yorkshire for all their outstanding work and support during this really difficult time. Hull and East Yorkshire, along with North Lincolnshire, on the Humber South Bank is one of the UK's most significant industrial and manufacturing clusters. Madam Deputy Speaker, the member for Hull East quite rightly reminded us of the capabilities from Siemens, Gamesa, and of course Ørsted in the offshore wind sector, and RB in health, and Wren Kitchens in the assembly manufacturing there, together with a really strong SME base as well in the region. It has really enabled the area to make real strides in improving the economic performance. Since 2010, for example, the employment rate in the Humber has gone up by 4.7%. There is undoubtedly, Madam Deputy Speaker, a bright and optimistic future for the Hull and East Yorkshire and the wider Humber economy. And the caravan manufacturing industry, with its long and proud history in Hull and East Yorkshire, can be an important part of that future. That is certainly how we see it in the Department for Business. Thousands of people are employed directly in the caravan manufacturing industry and its associated supply chain, as we heard from the Honourable Lady. These are important skilled jobs that make a significant contribution to the local and national economy. There is no doubt in my mind that the medium to long-term prospects for the industry are strong. The British public has a long-standing love affair with their caravans. They transformed the holiday habits of generations of families following the post-war boom in the 1950s through to the present day. And there are exciting new opportunities, I believe, for the industry with prospects of more families holidaying in the UK. The industry has shown that it can really diversify its products to meet the changing demands of a new generation that wants to have that wonderful caravan holiday. New modern luxury caravans, mobile homes can provide higher quality, safe distancing accommodation as we transition out of this current crisis. They can also provide flexible and, I think, environmentally friendly leisure experiences tailored to different tastes and pockets for decades ahead. The industry is also a major exporter, as we heard from the Honourable Lady, and is well placed to exploit new potential overseas markets. Now, I recognise, though, that the industry faces challenges in the immediate future. I'm well aware that large parts of the caravan sector have obviously furloughed workers, and regrettably some have been forced into redundancies. And for caravan workers and their families, along with many other workers up and down the country who may have been furloughed or been made redundant. Now, I recognise this must be deeply unsettling and worrying, and the Honourable Lady makes a very powerful point in terms of the interventions that we are making in the economy. However, in 2008, the caravan industry in Hull and East Riding was severely impacted by the financial crisis, as we've heard from the Honourable Gentleman. It bounced back, backed by this government's determination to do all it can to support the industry and its workers. It can bounce back again. And there are early positive signs. Coachman Caravans in Hull recently reopened its factory following a temporary closure due to COVID-19. They have followed the government's guidelines in order to restart production whilst keeping their staff safe. And they are not alone, Madam Deputy Speaker. East Yorkshire-based Victory Leisure Homes is investing in immersive visitor experience as it looks to capitalise on the future staycation. We're listening to the industry too, we really are. The decisions by the Chancellor to take action on the rise in vehicle excise duty on new motorhomes in the budget demonstrated that this government is determined to maintain a vibrant caravan and motorhome industry in the UK. And MPs, including the Honourable Lady, are to be congratulated for highlighting the impact the proposed increase would have had on the industry. If I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to briefly set out the government's business support package, which is already supporting the caravan industry and its workers. The government is committed to doing all it can to support UK business through this current crisis. And the Chancellor has announced what I believe is an unprecedented package of support to help firms to continue to keep people on the payroll. The government introduced the job retention scheme, the furlough scheme, as it is more commonly referred to. Since the scheme opened on the 20th of April, it has protected touching on 9 million workers, 1.1 million businesses through the crisis, including the caravan industry. On the 12th of May, the Chancellor announced that the scheme will continue until the end of October. It will continue in its current form until the end of July, and changes will allow more flexibility, which I know many colleagues appreciate, will actually come in from the start of August. This flexibility, I believe, will help support furloughed workers as they return to work. This includes, of course,
I thank the Minister for giving way, and as referenced in my speech, I am aware and grateful for the furlough scheme that the government have introduced. But what I'd just really like to know from the Minister is whether or not he will go to the Treasury and ask for that flexible furlough scheme that I mentioned in my speech, the ability to continue to furlough workers right through until spring 2021, so this industry can be there ready to take off again for the new summer orders.
I'm grateful for the Honourable Lady. The Chancellor has already announced the plans for the furlough scheme to come to an end in October. But all of our interventions, if you look at the way we've designed those interventions, they were designed to wrap our arms around the economy and jobs. As we come out of this crisis, the interventions have to be reviewed, which is why he reviewed the furlough scheme, and we reviewed whether it's C bills, CL bills, the bounce back scheme, to make sure that the recovery is as robust and as dynamic as we can make it. The government has also provided extensive financial support to SMEs through the bounce back scheme that I've just mentioned, Madam Deputy Speaker. Over 830,000 loans, £35 billion has actually gone out of the door and into the bank accounts of the very smallest businesses in our country. And we have provided significant grant support to small businesses through the Small Business Grant Fund and Retail, Hospitality and Leisure Grant Fund. Over £10 billion has been paid out to businesses across the country since the launch of those grant schemes, with more to come. Small businesses across Hull and East Riding have benefited from nearly £118 million of grant investment to date. On flexible furloughing, I am aware that the Honourable Lady, together with her fellow Hull MPs, have written to the Chancellor, which she quite rightly highlighted in her remarks. The sector-focused approach to job retention scheme is what she's quite rightly pushing for. She'll be aware, as I have mentioned already, the Chancellor has extended the furlough scheme till the end of October, and it's being made more flexible. From the 1st of July, she knows that employers can bring back to work employees that have previously been furloughed for an amount of time, and any shift patterns that they would like, while still being able to claim the JRS grant for their normal hours not worked. After July, of course, we'll introduce more flexibility to the furlough scheme so that we move out of it in a measured and orderly way to protect people's incomes. On reopening of dealerships, I'm happy to take another intervention.
I thank the Minister. He has been very generous, as I remember from the Education Select Committee. But I just want him to, want the Minister to just fully recognise the specifics of the caravan industry. At the point at which the furlough scheme is going to end is the point when the caravan manufacturing industry normally goes into a slower period, because it's a seasonal-based manufacturing industry. They have more orders, they do more business through the summer months. The winter months have always been quieter and always been slower. So the reason why we're asking for sector-specific is because as it stands at the moment, the furlough scheme will end just as the caravan manufacturing industry enters its usual low order and less production. This is why it needs to be sector-specific. This is why the caravan industry does need to be looked at separately from other industries, because it's seasonally based.
I'm grateful for that. She repeats the point she made in her excellent speech in a powerful way. But the furlough scheme is only one of the interventions that we are making across the economy. As I said, we review all of our interventions because the profile of interventions, and she will know this, is very different when you're asking people to stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives, and therefore businesses are closing and furloughing people. The profile of interventions as you come out will be different, which is why we've reviewed them all and continue to do so, and continue to stay close to the industry as well. That is what I can reassure her tonight. On dealerships, which she mentioned in her speech, and reopening of dealerships, the House will know that we reopened dealerships on the 1st of June to support these businesses to get back on their feet, whilst residential caravan parks have remained open throughout the lockdown period. Holiday parks have been closed in line with the wider restrictions on overnight stays for leisure purposes, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our ambition is to reopen caravan parks in step 3 of the government's recovery strategy. All decisions on reopening will of course be based on the latest scientific evidence and of course public health assessment. The government has engaged very closely with the holiday and home park sector to prepare guidance, as we have done on all other sectors. And it's great to see today non-essential retail open and so many wonderful stores in Stratford-on-Avon and around the country having wonderful, vibrant window displays and of course, applying all the safe working practices. And it will hopefully allow the sector to reopen safely and as quickly as possible. On business rate relief, an important point, the government has provided enhanced support to the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors through the rate relief system, given direct and acute impact COVID had on that sector. It is, of course, worth just reminding colleagues that it is up to the local authority to determine eligibility for reliefs, having regard to guidance issued by the government. So local authority have the power to offer business rates discounts beyond the predefined reliefs at their discretion. And I've spoken to, I think, 69 chief executives of local authorities. Many of my colleagues in the department have been making phone calls directly to talk to them about the discretionary funds as well available to them. Whilst other businesses that are not eligible for business rate relief, such as caravan leisure vehicle manufacturers, may be affected by COVID-19, those businesses will benefit from the wider business and employment support packages that I have set out. Of course I will.
Grateful to the Minister for giving way, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't expect an answer on the 2 chief asks immediately. Of course, the Minister will have to make representations to the Treasury. But I wonder whether he would be prepared to meet with the National Caravan Council and perhaps some of those manufacturers to discuss these specific asks.
I'm grateful, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd be delighted to meet with them. Very happy to arrange it as soon as possible. And I will, after this debate, ask my officials to reach out to him to make sure we get that done. And the Honourable Ladies, equally welcome, actually, all colleagues here are welcome to join. The government has introduced the business rates holiday for businesses in the retail sector, of course, and leisure sector, irrespective of rateable value, so that all eligible businesses will pay no business rates for 12 months. And this means that properties used by caravan parks and sites are eligible for that relief. This support is worth almost £10 billion to business and means an estimated 350,000 businesses have benefited from this, Madam Deputy Speaker. For the billing authority of Hull and East Riding, this support is worth £82 million to business and means about 3,500 businesses. And I have to pay tribute to the local authority and leadership there for actually getting that money out of the door. They've done a phenomenal job, and I thank them for it. The Honourable Lady mentioned other stimulus and a sort of a range of stimulus which we look at what's happening in other parts of the world, including, of course, maybe a caravan scrappage scheme, the accelerated capital write-down, and VAT, value-added tax measures that she mentioned. These are all, I think, interesting proposals. However, the Honourable Lady will understand that I cannot give any policy commitments now, or indeed speculate on or prejudge any further budget announcement by the Chancellor. She will, I'm sure, agree with me that is way above my pay grade. As we come through the current crisis, Madam Deputy Speaker, which we will, I have no doubt that the caravan industry in Hull and East Yorkshire and the United Kingdom can look to a bright future. It is will be important that the sector innovates and responds to customers' high standards and aspirations, as it has done in the past, and it will do again, fully exploit that market potential. I have no doubt that the industry will rise to that challenge. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to thank the Honourable Lady and colleagues for engaging in this very important debate, very important sector, and thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, for your patience.
Thank you. What a polite debate. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order.